But I went to see him one time at the Garden, at Boston Gardens, when it was still the Boston Gardens. And he sent word out to come back to the locker room after the game. And so
Don Johnson walked into Jimmy Kimmel's studio in June 2025, and nobody recognized him. The 75-year-old Miami Vice legend looked decades younger. His jawline was impossibly tight. His skin was flawless. Fans couldn't believe their eyes. Plastic surgery experts immediately started analyzing his face. They spotted signs of expensive work that most people could never afford. But Johnson has never admitted to anything. He's keeping his secrets locked away. The transformation is so dramatic that people are calling him unrecognizable. What did he do to his face? Don Johnson was born on December 15, 1949, inside his grandmother's small house in a quiet place called Flat Creek, Missouri. His mother Nell was just 16 years old when she had him, and his father Freddie was only 19. They were still kids themselves, trying to build a life without much money or support. Because they were so young, Don didn't grow up with the kind of guidance or safety most children need. His childhood felt more like surviving than living. By the time Don was a teenager, his mother was still in her early 30s. The gap between them felt more like siblings than parent and child, and that strange closeness came with its own problems. There wasn't much structure at home, just a lot of stress and chaos. When Don was 6 years old in 1955, the family moved to Wichita, Kansas, hoping for a better future. His father got a job working for Boeing Aircraft, which sounded like a good step forward, but it didn't change their struggles. Even with a steady job, the Johnson family stayed poor. They lived in a small house built for company workers, sharing one bathroom between 6 people. Don, his parents, and his 3 younger siblings all squeezed into that tiny space, always worried about bills, always scared something might go wrong. He later said that growing up poor like that left a mark on him that never went away. Even after he became famous, the fear of losing everything still haunted him. The poverty wasn't just financial, it shaped how he thought about safety, hard work, and the meaning of success. One of the most disturbing parts of Don's early life came when he was just 12. That's when he lost his virginity to his 16-year-old babysitter. It wasn't something he chose in a healthy way. It happened during a time when everything at home was falling apart. His parents were fighting constantly and heading toward divorce. No one was really watching the kids. That lack of supervision, that complete absence of care, allowed something like this to happen. Don later talked about it in interviews, showing just how deeply it affected him. The home he lived in wasn't just chaotic, it was violent. Don's father had a terrifying temper. He would beat Don and his siblings regularly. The house was a place of fear where you never knew what might trigger an outburst. Don would later describe his childhood as incredibly abusive, and not just because of the beatings. It was the feeling of being completely alone in your own home, even when your family was right there. His mother tried to raise him after the divorce, but she couldn't handle him. By the time he was 13, he was acting out so badly that he ended up in juvenile court. The judge decided he'd be better off with his father, even though his father was the one who had hurt him. That decision shows just how desperate things had become. Even through all the darkness, there were small moments that shaped Don in ways no one expected. His mother worked as a beautician, and her beauty salon became a strange kind of classroom. Sitting in that shop, Don watched how people talked, how they carried themselves, how appearances could change the way people were treated. These lessons about style and image stayed with him. They helped him later when he had to become someone else on screen. Back then, the salon felt like the only place in his life where people were trying to look their best, even when everything else was falling apart. In 1967, something happened that changed Don's life. He had been kicked off the football team for falling asleep in business class. To make up the credits, he joined a drama class without much interest. But when he stepped on stage as Tony in West Side Story, something inside him lit up. For the first time, the chaos of his life faded, and the audience gave him something he never got at home: attention and approval. His teacher saw something in him and pushed him to audition for a summer theater program at the University of Kansas. He got a partial scholarship, which later turned into a full one. That one moment on stage gave him something to chase. It became his way out. By the time he was 13, he had already been through juvenile court. His mother had given up trying to control him. The court sent him back to Missouri to live with his father. But something unexpected happened. His father, the same man who had once beaten him, started teaching him how to hunt and fish. These quiet moments outdoors, away from everything else, felt magical to Don. They gave him a sense of structure and purpose. At the same time, he had to work to help support the family. During his final year in Wichita, he juggled jobs as a butcher's apprentice and a shoe salesman while still going to school. That heavy workload built a work ethic that would later carry him through the brutal ups and downs of Hollywood. After his high school play, he took a full scholarship to the University of Kansas to study drama. He was 18 and ready to chase something bigger than what life had given him so far. But it didn't last. He started dating a 29-year-old acting teacher during his first year, and by the second year, he dropped out entirely. He moved to San Francisco and got accepted into the American Conservatory Theater. He was only 19, had no money, no backup plan, just a dream and desperation. That move marked his final break from his past. San Francisco gave him a chance to turn all his childhood pain into performance. In 1969, when he was just 20, Don starred in an off-Broadway play called Fortune and Men's Eyes at the Coronet Theater in Los Angeles. The play shocked audiences with a graphic prison sexual assault scene, and Don played a character who was part of it. Sal Mineo directed the production and acted in it too. The performance was so raw and controversial that some critics called it disturbing. It didn't make Don famous, but it made people notice him. The play's social message even led to the founding of an advocacy group for former prisoners. The next year, in 1970, Don made his film debut in The Magic Garden of Stanley Sweetheart. He played a college dropout who becomes an adult film producer in New York's underground world of sex and drugs. Andy Warhol helped cast him, seeing something unique in Don's energy. The film flopped, but it showed how far Don was willing to go for a role. He was only 20, already risking everything. In 1971, he starred in one of the strangest films of the time, Zachariah. It was a psychedelic Western rock musical with live bands acting in surreal scenes. Don had bleach blonde hair and even rolled around in horse manure in one moment. The film bombed hard, but he kept going. In 1973, he appeared fully nude in The Herod Experiment, a film about sexual freedom on a college campus. He was 23, and the film also featured a then 15-year-old Melanie Griffith, who would later become his wife. The film made money, but didn't help his career much. Still, he took what he could get. Finally, in 1975, he starred in A Boy and His Dog, a strange but powerful post-apocalyptic film where he played a teen survivor who talks telepathically to his dog. It was disturbing and violent, but it caught people's attention. The film won a Hugo Award in 1976, and Don himself won a Golden Scroll Award for Best Actor. After years of struggle, this was the moment people finally took him seriously. His raw talent, shaped by a lifetime of pain, had finally found its place. In 1984, Don Johnson's life changed completely when he was cast as Detective Sonny Crockett in Miami Vice. To fit the role, he had to bleach his naturally dark hair blonde, and the process was so rough that it badly hurt his scalp. The show's costume budget went through the roof. Johnson wore pastel t-shirts under Armani and Versace suits that cost over $50,000 every season. One small accident during a fitting turned into a trend. He forgot his socks, and the producer liked the look so much that it became a style. Just 6 months after the show started, pastel suit sales tripled, and Ray-Ban's Wayfarer sunglasses sales went up by 2,000%. All of this turned into a billion-dollar fashion movement across the 1980s, and it all started with Don Johnson's look. When the first episode aired on September 16, 1984, it completely changed how TV shows were made. The budget was $1.3 million, which was way higher than other cop shows at the time. The opening scene alone used 47 different camera angles, while most shows used just around a dozen. The director used new camera techniques, like Steadicams, and even rented special equipment that cost $200,000. Music wasn't just background noise. They paid $10,000 each week for real songs from artists like Phil Collins and Glenn Frey. That first episode also had 14 costume changes just for Johnson and used 3 different Ferrari Daytonas for the chase scenes. When it aired, more than 15 million people watched it, making it NBC's biggest premiere of 1984. The show hit another high in 1985 when an episode called Evan changed how people saw Johnson. In it, his character remembered the painful moment when he lost his partner during a drug bust. Johnson drew from his real-life pain of losing his father at 12, and during filming, he cried on camera 8 times in a row. That episode alone cost $1.8 million to make and included a 12-minute flashback shot in black and white. Fans were so moved that NBC received 847 letters in a single week praising his acting. The performance helped him win a Golden Globe in 1986. When he stood on stage to accept the award, he only spoke for 37 seconds. But when he thanked his late father with tears in his eyes, it became one of the most played moments on TV that year. In 1986, the show became deeply connected with real Miami culture. They filmed in 23 different neighborhoods, boosting the city's economy by over $4 million a year. They hired local actors, paid real drug enforcement agents for advice, and even shot scenes in real drug zones with heavy police protection that cost $3,000 per day. Johnson even learned some Spanish and used it during scenes. At its peak, the show had 30 million viewers each week. Tourists started coming to Miami just to visit places shown in the episodes, bringing in almost $90 million in tourism money. But behind the scenes, things weren't so smooth. In 1987, a serious fight broke out between Don Johnson and his co-star, Philip Michael Thomas. Thomas found out Johnson was getting $75,000 per episode, while he was getting only $25,000. During one episode called Love at First Sight, Thomas refused to film with Johnson for 3 whole days. NBC had to fly in top executives for emergency meetings, which delayed filming and cost them $450,000. Thomas wanted equal pay and demanded his name appear first in the credits. The final deal gave him a raise to $50,000 and a rotating credit order. But the damage was done. The tension stayed so strong that in later seasons, many of their scenes were filmed separately and edited together afterward. In 1986, something unexpected happened. Don Johnson became a music star. On September 30th, he released his first album called Heartbeat. The title song, which he didn't write but made his own, reached number 5 on the Billboard charts. Within a month, the album was certified gold. It featured stars like Ron Wood from the Rolling Stones, Willie Nelson, What started as a side project became one of the most successful actor-to-singer moves in entertainment history. 2 years later, in 1988, Johnson surprised everyone again with his acting. In a quiet film called Sweetheart's Dance, he played a man going through a midlife crisis. He starred alongside Susan Sarandon, and critics were stunned. Roger Ebert said it was the best thing Johnson had ever done. The Washington Post called it his breakthrough. But while critics loved it, the film flopped, making only $3 million on a $9 million budget. Even so, it proved Johnson could act in serious roles. In 1990, Johnson went in a much more provocative direction. He starred in The Hot Spot, a steamy thriller directed by Dennis Hopper. The film was filled with tension, moody music, and erotic scenes that pushed boundaries for mainstream cinema. Critics compared it to Twin Peaks. Though it didn't do well at the box office, it became a cult favorite and showed that Johnson wasn't afraid to take risks. Even during Miami Vice, Johnson wanted to do more than act. In January 1985, he helped direct a 2-part episode called Golden Triangle. It involved crime operations linked to Thailand and included personal touches like his character saying he was from Wichita, just like Johnson had been in real life. These episodes showed his growing influence behind the scenes and hinted at his future work as a producer. Johnson's Golden Globe win in 1986 wasn't just about work. On stage, he emotionally thanked Melanie Griffith, his partner at the time. Their relationship was a constant focus in the press. By tying his award speech to their love story, he showed a softer side of himself that fans hadn't seen before. It was the moment where his personal life and professional success met in front of millions. Long before Miami Vice, Johnson had already made some reckless personal choices. In 1968, when he was just 18, he married a dancer whose name has never been revealed. That marriage lasted only 2 months before it was annulled. Then, in 1973, he married another woman, someone he later described dismissively as a rich bimbo, and that marriage ended in just a few days. These early relationships hinted at the wild and unstable love life he would become famous for. But the most disturbing story started in 1972. Johnson, then 22, began a relationship with Melanie Griffith, who was only 14. Her mother, Tippi Hedren, somehow allowed this to happen. They moved in together when Griffith was just 15. They married in January 1976, on her 18th birthday, but it fell apart within 6 months. Looking back, the relationship was something Hollywood ignored at the time. But today, it would be seen as deeply inappropriate and predatory. Their chaotic story didn't end there. In 1989, they got married again, and Melanie became pregnant with their daughter, Dakota Johnson, who was born on October 4, 1989. The wedding happened in June, just months after Johnson ended things with Barbra Streisand. Their second marriage lasted until 1996, but it was filled with wild behavior. Johnson used drugs like cocaine and Quaaludes, drank heavily, and cheated openly. He threw wild parties with models, politicians, and even criminals. Eventually, Griffith couldn't take it anymore and left him for Antonio Banderas. Between these two marriages, from 1981 to 1985, Johnson lived with Patty D'Arbanville. They had a son, Jesse Wayne Johnson, born on December 7, 1982. But once Miami Vice took off, everything changed. Johnson was always in Miami, filming for months at a time, while Patty was left to raise their son alone. She eventually realized that fame had changed him too much, and their relationship ended. Finally, after all the chaos, Johnson tried something different. On April 29, 1999, he married Kelly Flegger, a Montessori teacher from San Francisco. The wedding took place at the home of billionaire Gordon Getty, with Robert Wagner as best man and the city's mayor officiating. They had 3 children together: Atherton Grace, born in December 1999, Jasper in June 2002, and Deacon in April 2006. At 49, Johnson finally seemed ready for a stable life. Kelly didn't let him fall back into his old ways. She gave him structure, and their marriage has lasted over 25 years, something many thought was impossible for a man who once burned everything he touched. In 2002, Don Johnson found himself caught in something that sounded more like a Hollywood script than real life. He was stopped by Border Patrol on the German-Swiss border, and what they found stunned everyone. Inside his briefcase were papers linked to $8 billion in questionable financial deals. Johnson said he was just in Europe trying to secure funding for a movie. He insisted the documents were legit, tied to a film production. In the end, he wasn't charged with any crime. But that didn't matter. Hollywood doesn't wait for a court verdict. Just the headlines alone were enough to scare off producers. Overnight, his name was dragged through scandal, and studios that once lined up to work with him suddenly went quiet. It didn't matter that he was innocent. His reputation had taken a hit, and it would take years to recover. But before that scandal, between 1996 and 2001, Johnson had one lifeline. It was a show called Nash Bridges. On paper, it was just another cop show, but for Johnson, it was everything. He starred in it, produced it, and even got a cut of the profits. He played Inspector Nash Bridges, a San Francisco detective who drove around in a bright yellow 1971 Plymouth Barracuda. The show lasted 6 seasons and gave him a steady paycheck at a time when he really needed one. Years later, he sued Reicher Entertainment for unpaid profits and walked away with $19 million in a 2013 settlement. That lawsuit saved him when he needed it most. Even with Nash Bridges helping him stay afloat, his money problems weren't over. In 2003, City National Bank of Los Angeles said he owed them almost $1 million, plus legal fees. By July 2004, Johnson filed for bankruptcy. At the center of it all was his beloved Woody Creek Ranch, the same property he bought back in 1987 from Terry Butcher, a famous socialite from the 80s. He loved that ranch, but now it was on the verge of being auctioned. The media had a field day. They called it a riches to rags moment. The man who once made tens of millions was now scrambling to keep his home. At the last second, Johnson made a mystery payment and saved the ranch. No one really knows how he pulled it off. Some said he sold art, jewelry, or even one of his classic cars. But by then, the damage was done. The world knew Don Johnson wasn't just a fallen star. He was financially broken. It didn't help that his movie roles weren't enough to patch the holes. In 1996, he played a smug, well-dressed golfer in Tin Cup alongside Kevin Costner. The movie made over $75 million worldwide. But even that couldn't touch the mountain of bills he was facing. He had too many homes, too many cars, too many ex-wives, and too many payments. He was living like it was still the 1980s, but the paychecks weren't what they used to be. No matter how well Tin Cup did, it wasn't going to fix years of overspending. That same decade, he had tried to make it big in music. In 1986, his single Heartbeat did well enough, but by 1989, his next album crashed hard. It barely got radio play, and the only countries where it showed up on charts were Germany and Switzerland. He was spending more on tours and production than he was making. It was a hard lesson, and after that, he left music behind. He did manage a soft hit in 1988, singing a romantic duet with Barbra Streisand, but that too felt more like a moment than a real comeback. Years later, he surprised everyone again. In 2014, he took on the role of Sheriff Earl McGraw in the TV adaptation of From Dusk Till Dawn. This was a big deal because Michael Parks had always played that character. For Johnson to take over was unexpected, and fans were curious. The series ran for 3 seasons until 2016, and his character's sudden death early on became the spark that drove the story. Outside the US, the show was pushed as a Netflix original, giving Johnson a new kind of visibility. It was gritty, dark, and mixed vampires with lawmen, and Johnson fit right in. But his biggest comeback happened in 2019, when he joined the star-studded cast of Knives Out. He played Richard Drysdale, the smug, suspicious son-in-law in a family full of secrets. The film exploded at the box office, earning over $312 million globally. Johnson's performance was praised, and he wasn't just part of the cast, he stood out. When the sequel, Glass Onion, came around, he was back again. After years of being seen as a cautionary tale, he was now part of one of the decade's most talked-about movie franchises. In 2022, he played Arthur in Book Club, The Next Chapter, a sequel to the 2018 film. This time, the story moved to Italy. They filmed in Venice, Rome, and even Tuscany. Johnson's character was settled, calm, and in love with Jane Fonda's character, Vivian. It showed a softer side of him. The movie gave him a chance to shine in a light-hearted romance, and viewers loved it. The film hit theaters in May 2023 and started streaming on Peacock the following month. Then came Rebel Ridge, released on Netflix in September 2024. This time, Johnson was the bad guy, a corrupt police chief in a small town. The film was a hit and even won Best Movie Made for Television at the Critics' Choice Awards. Reviewers said Johnson stole the screen. The character was dark, cruel, and the total opposite of his old Miami Vice image. But that's what made it work. He was evolving, and people noticed. It earned multiple nominations, and Netflix brought him into millions of homes all over the world. In the fall of 2024, he stepped into a completely different kind of role. On ABC's Dr. Odyssey, Johnson played Captain Robert Massey, the gentlemanly leader of a cruise ship dealing with everything from chaotic passengers to wild sea adventures. The show mixed medical drama with ocean storms and even had episodes featuring psychedelic taffy and orca encounters. His calm, commanding presence made him the emotional anchor of the show. It aired on both ABC and Hulu, and once again, Johnson found himself in the center of something big. But then, in June 2025, people started noticing something odd. Johnson, now 75, looked younger than anyone expected. Too young. Rumors of plastic surgery exploded when he appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live, with a jawline that seemed just a little too tight. Experts weighed in. One surgeon from Florida said it looked like he'd had a facelift focused on his mid and lower face, but had left his neck alone. Another doctor in London said it might just be subtle fillers and great skin care. Some even claimed he hadn't had anything done at all. Either way, fans were stunned. The cost of such work could easily be $50,000 or more, but Johnson never confirmed a thing. Social media lit up. Videos with titles like, "Don Johnson is now 75, but look at him after losing all his money," started trending. People shared before and after photos, debating what was real and what wasn't. His Instagram posts with his wife, Kelly, who he married 26 years earlier, became the focus of endless comparisons. Some said he looked incredible. Others said he was unrecognizable. But one thing was clear: Don Johnson was still a topic of conversation.